and welcome to this exploring session. I'm not going to give it a sort of name. Usually it's first look, second look sort of title for these things. This is sort of an appendix look at the Spanish tragedy, because we have, in our exploration so far, looked at the earliest version of the text we have, sans additions, and I've been, relatively dogmatic in that, of just going, no, we're looking at this text, without complicating it with additional material added later by another author. So we're looking at the 5 editions today, separately. We're going to be running most of the scenes in their entirety, so you'll get the stuff that goes before it or after it within the scene, if there is anything that goes before or after it. So we may be running reasonably lengthy chunks of stuff we've already done, but just to give a sense of flow, because we do want to get a sense of how well the editions fit within the play, and then we have a chance to sort of debate what the options are with these editions and what they're trying to do. Now, the editions were added about 10 years after the first printing, so they first appear in 1602, around about the time that there's a note in Henslow's diary about paying Ben Jonson for some editions. But we don't really think that these bits are those editions. So these may be totally different editions to the ones that we don't have that Ben Jonson may have written. There's a possibility that by that point in time, Spanish tragedy might actually have been dancing around different companies' repertoires. Or it's just simply a matter of sprucing it up for a new run, because Spanish tragedy turns up a lot. It really is a warhorse. It just keeps marching on in the repertoire of early modern drama. So hence the fact we've given so much time to it, actually. I mean, we've probably done too much on the Spanish tragedy. Possibly. So anyway, to explore these editions today, Alan, introduce yourself to the room.
Alan Scott from Suffolk, reading strange texts.
Lalitte, introduce yourself.
I'm Lalitte from Paris. I'm a teacher.
Aliki, introduce yourself.
Aliki from Greece, in England, actor-translator.
Elizabeth, introduce yourself.
Hi, my name's Elizabeth Amisu, and I'm an author based in Romford.
Sarah, introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Sarah Blake. I'm an actor, writer and director from England originally, but now living in Germany.
And Rachael, introduce yourself.
Rachael Nicole on one of the coasts with the most.
Briony, introduce yourself.
Briony Sparrow. I'm an actor originally from Germany, now in England.
And Lynn, introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Lynn. I am on the opposite coast of the United States from Rachael. I live in the northwestern United States, and I'm just an early modern drama superfan.
And I'm your host, Robert Crighton. I will occasionally read some stage directions and generally pretend that I know what I'm doing. So we've all, or many of us, have been looking at the Spanish tragedy. When this video drops, you may not yet have the second half of the play for the second time or the third time. Third time through. We've done it 3 times. We've done a first look, slow, chatty, a bit like this. We did a second look at pace, and then we did a second look with cameras on and off, and an attempt at production and tongue-bitingly fun. It was. So hopefully we come to this with a certain level of knowledge and understanding, but we have made sure that at least one person in the room has less knowledge than everybody else, so that we can do, and it's your opportunity now to guess who that is. So without further ado, we're going to read Act 2, Scene 5. It follows the death of Horatio, Hieronimo's son, in a particularly brutal fashion, and Hieronimo is about to discover the body. And this scene, as they contain some additions and some additional business. I'll ask Aliki. I think you can read Hieronimo, please. I'll ask Elizabeth, could you be Isabella? Alan, could you read Jaques or Jaques? And Briony, could you read Pedro, please? I, as ever, will read stage directions, and we'll see how this little scene flows. So, horrible murder has occurred. Everybody exits, leaving a hanging body in an arbour, and Hieronimo enters in his shirt, etc.
What outcries pluck me from my naked bed, and chill my throbbing heart with trembling fear, which never danger yet could daunt before? Who calls Hieronimo? Speak, here I am. Did not slumber, therefore 'tis no dream. No, it was some woman cried for help, and here within this garden did she cry, and in this garden must I rescue her. But stay, what murderous spectacle's this? A man hanged up, and all the murderers gone, in my bower to lay the guilt on me. This place was made for pleasure, not for death.
And begins to cut down the body.
Those garments that he wears I oft have seen. Alas, 'tis Horatio, my sweet son. Oh, no, but he that whilom was my son. Oh, was it thou that calledst me from my bed? Oh, speak, if any spark of life remain. I am thy father. Who hath slain my son? What savage monster, not of humankind, hath here been glutted with thy harmless blood, and left thy bloody corpse dishonoured here for me, amidst these dark and deathful shades, to drown thee with an ocean of my tears? O heaven, why made you night to cover sin? By day this deed of darkness had not been. O earth, why didst thou not in time devour the vile profaner of this sacred bower? Poor Horatio, what hadst thou misdone to lease thy life ere life was new begun? O wicked butcher, whatsoe'er thou wert, how couldst thou strangle virtue and desert? I me most wretched that have lost my joy in leasing my Horatio, my sweet boy.
Enter Isabella.
My husband's absence makes my heart to throb. Hieronimo?
Dear Isabella, help me to lament, for sighs are stopped and all my tears are spent.
What world of grief! My son Horatio! Oh, where's the author of this endless woe?
To know the author were some ease of grief, for in revenge my heart would find relief.
Then is he gone? And is my son gone too? Oh, gush out tears, fountains and floods of tears. Blow sighs and raise an everlasting storm, for outrage fits our cursed wretchedness. Ay me, Hieronimo, sweet husband, speak.
He supped with us tonight, frolic and merry, and said he would go visit Balthazar at the Duke's palace. There the prince doth lodge. He had no custom to stay out so late. He may be in his chamber. Some go see Rodrigo, ho!
Enter Pedro and Jaques.
Ay me, he raves, sweet Hieronimo.
True, all Spain takes note of it. Besides, he is so generally beloved. His Majesty the other day did grace him with waiting on his cup. These be favours which do assure me he cannot be short-lived.
Sweet Hieronimo.
I wonder how this fellow got his clothes. Sirrah, I'll know the truth of all. Jaques, run to the Duke of Castile presently, and bid my son Horatio to come home. I and his mother have had strange dreams tonight. Do you hear me, sir?
Aye, sir.
Well, so be gone. Pedro, come hither. Knowst thou who this is?
Too well, sir.
Too well? Who is it? Peace, Isabella. Nay, blush not, man.
It is my Lord Horatio.
St. James, but this doth make me laugh. That there are more deluded than myself.
Deluded?
I would have sworn myself within this hour that this had been my son Horatio. His garments are so like, huh? Are they not great persuasions?
Oh, would to God it were not so.
Were not, Isabella? Dost thou dream it is? Can thy soft bosom entertain a thought that such a black deed of mischief could be done on one so pure and spotless as our son? Away! I am ashamed.
Dear Hieronimo, Cast a more serious eye upon thy grief. Weak apprehension gives but weak belief.
It was a man, sure, that was hanged up here, a youth. As I remember, I cut him down. If it should prove my son now, after all, say you, light! Lend me a taper. Let me look again. God, confusion, mischief, torment, death, and hell drop all your stings at once in my cold bosom that now is stiff with horror. Kill me quickly. Be gracious to me, thou infective night, and drop this deed of murder down on me in my waste of grief with thy large darkness, and let me not survive to see the light may put me in the mind I had a son.
Oh, sweet Horatio! Oh, my dearest son!
How strangely had I lost my way to grief. Sweet, lovely rose, ill-plucked before thy time. Fair, worthy son, not conquered, but betrayed. Kiss thee now, for words with tears are stained.
And I'll close up the glasses of his sight, for once these eyes were only my delight.
Seest thou this handkerchief besmeared with blood? It shall not from me till I take revenge. Seest thou those wounds that yet are bleeding fresh? I'll not entomb them till I have revenge. Then will I joy amidst my discontent, till then my sorrow never shall be spent.
The heavens are just, murder cannot be hid. Time is the author both of truth and right, and time will bring this treachery to light.
Meanwhile, good Isabella, cease thy plaints, or at least dissemble them a while. So shall we sooner find the practice out, and learn by whom all this was brought about. Come. Now let us take him up and bear him in front from out this cursed place.
And they take him up.
Say his dirge, singing, fits not this case.
And then there would be a massive chunk of Latin, which I'm not going to be so cruel as to make Aliki do. Some really interesting things about that. I mean, Sarah was talking about, it would be nice to hear more from Isabella. And of course, Isabella just seems to be almost like a prompt. It's really weird at times how Isabella's structured. Because it's like, I meet Hieronimo's sweet husband speak. It's the new bit now. You have to say it here. And then he raves sweet Hieronimo. Feels like it's just describing what's supposed to now happen. It's really weird at times, and I don't know if that's just me being unfair because it sort of leaps in on the text. Sarah.
Yeah, I was looking forward to getting more Isabella. I'm slightly disappointed with the more Isabella that we get. I found that really weird. I won't say anything more about it now because I don't want to get too judgy early on. Because I did that scene. As Hieronimo, I suppose I am biased towards the original version because that's the version that I know. But I find this really bizarre. This insertion, but then I don't want to get too judgy about it. So yeah.
Okay, we'll go around the room. I think I know where you're going, and we'll see what the room says. Briony, then Rachael, then Lynn.
Just from the point of view of because I was reading Pedro, it's all a bit odd. Like, what are they doing whilst Hieronimo and Isabella are stood there grieving? It's really awkward and weird, and I wouldn't want to be in that position on an actual stage.
And we will hear more from Pedro and Jaques anon. But yeah, I was thinking that just they come. He calls for Rodrigo. Pedro and Jaques come in.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm assuming that's to do with his madness, kind of thing, but I don't know. And then they nothing. But then maybe there's inferred business. If he's flailing about, then actually the servants might have some stuff to do. maybe not. Anyway, Rachael, then Lynn.
Yeah, the structure of this scene is completely changed. I mean, not just that there's more characters in, but you know, when we get Isabella speaking, or we get Hieronimo, you know, how he was speaking in this scene, when it comes to their son, it's these long things that we get that neoclassical type of feel from it. And this changes it into a dialogue and turns it really, or not a dialogue, but into a whole, you know, scene. And it also changes the style of it, I think, because when it's just Hieronimo alone, even if he's screaming out into the night, you can see that he's alone because nobody comes. Or you could play that scene, you know, from the not in this edition, but in the one that we were doing last time, in Stage Whispers, and you could do a lot of it's a lot of internalized stuff, and this takes that internalized stuff and puts it outward. And the servants coming in, you know, to see his, you know, I guess, you know, this is supposed to be madness or his disarray in this moment. You know, I feel like the servants could be there to hold him back, and it's made into a much more outward grief than we got before. So this is just in so many ways a completely different vibe from the other scene, a completely different, you know, structure and everything.
Yeah, I absolutely. I think that's absolutely bang on the money. Lynn.
Yeah, well, I don't mind being judgy because that's me. So what? Yeah, other than that, like the servants who feel a little random. I suppose if they keep coming up, then keep showing up, then they won't feel as shoehorned in the larger scheme of things. But another thing that strikes me as a little kind of problematic in this scene is the way that Isabella's characterized. She's the one that says, cast a more serious eye. It's going to be all right because murder cannot be hit. Whether or not it's going to be all right. But, you know, time is the author of truth and right. You know, we'll get to the bottom of this. So she seems to kind of be the voice of reason in this scene. And she's the one that becomes hysterical and kills herself later in the play. So I think it would be difficult for an actress to kind of reconcile all of that.
Alan.
Yeah, I'm not sure that the bits that have been added there actually add anything much to the Gaiety of Nations. Well, that's probably not the right phrase. I think the version as we did the other day works better because it is that much more intense, and bringing on the two servants, who I don't think actually appeared in the original version at all from recollection. I don't recall either of them.
They might be inferred to be the random servants that we had, but I don't think they were named explicitly. There is a different Pedro. Yeah, not to be confused with the other Pedro.
Yeah, and is Rodrigo one of those two, or have we effectively got three bodies being called for?
There is the glosses that I've looked at, and I think it's reasonable. He just says a random name. It has no logic at all. I think one of the things here is one of the clues we can throw in is one of the subtitles for this play is Hieronimo is mad again, and that seems to be what this is doing. Whereas before was a question of a person finding their son and is in grief, and then in the middle of that scene he just goes bonkers, and then there's a sudden reverse ferret as we return to the text as before. And it seems to be that it's about demonstrating an actor doing this kind of stuff rather than what the character is supposed to be doing. I'll go to Aliki first, even though Sarah went up first. Aliki, then Sarah.
You sort of said it for me. It makes you wonder whether some particularly vain actor thought, I really need a mad scene here.
Because there aren't enough in the rest of the play.
Or it's what the audience want. It's what the
Yeah.
audience want. Yeah.
I was going to say, it's like by the time this rewrite was done, the play must have been seen quite a few times. They were thinking, well, we need to just add a bit more because people want to see a bit more of Mad Hieronimo. Because I wasn't even sure if the subtitle was a joke, because it kind of, when I read that subtitle, Hieronimo's Mad Again, I thought that sounds like a comedy. It's like Basil Fawlty or something.
And that's
weird.
the thing. This play has a strange relationship with comedy because there is a spoof version of the first part that is also effectively spoofing this. So even then, people knew this could be funny if you just took it to the nth degree. So it has a really interesting relationship between pathos and bathos flipping. Sarah, then Alan.
Okay, so now, I'm ready to get judgy now. Strap in.
We're already on the first edition. There's another 4 to go.
Okay, so I spent a lot of time thinking about Hieronimo over the last few weeks, and the thing that I love about him and that I love about this play in general is the way it hangs together psychologically. Because Hieronimo at the beginning of the play is not mad. He's this sort of slightly pompous, slightly silly, bumbling courtier who's very good at his job and loves his son. And I think I've said to you before, Rob, he's like everybody's favourite uncle. He's a bit daft and everyone's a little bit embarrassed by him, but he's basically a very good-hearted man. And then this terrible, terrible thing happens to him. He finds his own son, his only son, murdered in his own garden. And that, grief does unhinge people. But the thing for me that really unhinges him, the thing that really leads him down this rabbit hole, is that he is basically a good man. He is basically a kind-hearted, generous, good-hearted man who doesn't really want to kill anybody. And the reason he has all this conflict from the fact, on the one hand, he feels the urge to take revenge for the death of his son, which, let's face it, Horatio, he's killed for very slight reasons. It's a really horrible murder. I know all murder's horrible, but it's particularly awful because it's so frivolous in a way. And he absolutely feels the need to take revenge. But it's not in his nature to do so. It's not in his nature to hurt people and to murder people especially. And so he goes mad from the cognitive dissonance. And we have moments throughout the rest of the play where sometimes he seems more mad than others, sometimes he seems more in himself, but there's kind of a really good psychological reason, and I really feel that Kid understood the psychology of what was going on in his character, and it develops and it escalates right the way through the play. With this, I know shock can do strange things to people, but come on. I mean, if you make him this mad now, at this point, he's got nowhere to go. And all that beautiful story, that beautiful arc of the more he prevaricates, the longer he waits to take his revenge because his heart isn't really in it, the madder he becomes because the conflict grows and the dissonance grows within him. It throws all that away. It completely wastes it. That is what I think. I'll shut up now.
No, I think that's very fair. Alan, then Rachael.
Yeah, the other thing that got me is the comments that, he wants a full-on mad scene, and yet the point at which he's calling for the servants and actually asking them to go off and do actually quite sensible things, sort of undercuts that. So it's maybe exploring the, it's flashes of madness rather than full-on grief. But it just didn't quite hang together for me in the same way that the original did.
It lessens the tragedy because if there's an implication that actually he was a bit bonkers, before before he goes through that cognitive dissonance journey, then it's not that he was undone by what has happened to him from the murder he's been through and the terrible, terrible conflict that goes on within him about whether to kill these people or not. It's like, oh, well, he was a bit unhinged anyway, and so, of course, he's going to go down that route. It kind of for me, it takes away from the tragedy of it.
Yeah, and also that we've got more Isabella, but it's sort of lessening of Isabella as
Yeah,
well.
it
Because
is.
she's just a prompt for stuff, rather than someone saying something for herself. Rachael.
Yeah, that was something I wanted to say before too, is that Isabella in this really seems to play like an echo almost. Like, you know what I mean? Like it's I don't know, like, yeah. But I also wanted to say to what Sarah was saying, that kids' version that we read the other day seems so much more specific than this one. Like the specificity of grief versus madness, which isn't, you know, which might have meant something specific to them, you know, certain actions or something to them, but it's not realistic. And then that the servants do really diffuse the tension that is in this scene, and they lower it's not that they lower the stakes almost, but they just, I don't know. Yeah.
Alan, then we will move on.
Yeah, no, I'm just wondering, in fact, whether the additional bits for Isabella and for the two servants are there to allow the actor to actually get a chance to get a breath, because otherwise it is just a sustained rant.
It also feels that they're just a foil, that they're there to just prompt more business from Hieronimo as well. That there's also stage business as they're running around that might be flowing, and how that goes. Okay, well we're fans so far. We're going to go into a short section. I decided it wasn't worth doing the full scene for this edition, which is very, very brief. I think it's only about 10 lines long. So we're going to jump to Act 3, Scene 2. Act 3, Scene 2 has his massive speech by Hieronimo that opens it, where he finds out by letter the circumstances of his son's death. And what's happened with Bella Imperia, and by the end has largely resolved that something must be done. At which point, of course, we have the entrance of the various people who have been vaguely involved in all of that. And there's a few lines that have been added to this scene. So we're going to go from the end of Hieronimo's speech. I'll ask Lynn, could you be Hieronimo this time? Rachael, could you read Pedringano? And Lalitte, could you read Lorenzo? So Lorenzo's a thoroughly dodgy person. Pedringano's not exactly nice either. But they haven't quite got round to massively stabbing each other in the back yet. So there's still time for that action. But we rejoin Hieronimo, contemplating where he is at. This is mid-speech, so it is just sort of be a bit sad, Lynn, and then take up the cudgels.
I therefore will by circumstances try what I can gather to confirm this writ, and, hearkening near the Duke of Castile's house, close, if I can, with Bella Imperia, to listen more, but nothing to betray.
Enter Pedringano.
Now, Pedringano,
Now, Hieronimo,
where's thy lady?
I know not. Here's my lord.
Enter Lorenzo. Lalitte, you are currently muted.
Sorry. Sorry, it's moved.
How now?
How
Who's
now?
this?
Yeah. How now? Who's this, Hieronimo?
My lord.
He asketh for my lady Bella Imperia.
What to do, Hieronimo? The Duke, my father, hath, upon some disgrace, a while removed her hence. But if it be aught I may inform her of, tell me, Hieronimo, and I'll let her know it.
Nay, my lord, I thank you. It shall not need. I had a suit unto her, but too late, and her disgrace makes me unfortunate.
Why so, Hieronimo? Use me.
Who? You, my lord. I reserve your favor for a greater honor. This is a very toy, my lord, a toy.
All's one, Hieronimo. Acquaint me with it.
In faith, my lord, 'tis an idle thing. I must confess, I've been too slack, too tardy, too remiss unto your honor.
How now, Hieronimo?
In truth, my lord, it is a thing of nothing. The murder of a son, or so. A thing of nothing, my lord.
Why then, farewell.
My grief no heart, my thoughts no tongue can tell.
And exit Hieronimo. So I'll just ask those who were here a couple of weeks ago. Can you guess where the additions came in? That felt much less awkward to me in terms of flow. Would you have known there was an addition there? Lynn.
Well, one thing that, if you were going to keep this, you would have to make a decision about whether the murder of a son or so was to Lorenzo or an aside. And if it's to Lorenzo, that changes a lot. If Lorenzo knows this early in the play that Hieronimo suspects him, or Hieronimo knows that he's responsible for Horatio's death. So teeny little moment, but that could really change a lot of the subtext of the whole rest of the play.
Yes, I mean, the way you played it there, I read it as that it was direct to me, so I was kind of covering up and being cool, but thinking shit.
Yeah. So, but that was just sort of a choice in the moment. You could have him go ahead and say the murder of a son or so clearly as an aside, and then the play proceeds in basically the way it would without that addition. But that's a chance you have to heighten the tension between the Lorenzo Balthazar faction and Hieronimo.
Sarah.
I mean, I know where the additions are, obviously because I did this, but they're far. I mean, it's far more deft than the last lot. It is interesting though, because I remember when I was prepping for the character, I actually sent you in the many questions I sent to you by email. One of the questions I asked you was, at the end of this scene, does he actually believe that Lorenzo murdered Horatio at this point, or does he not? Because for me, that was a really key question for this scene. Like, does he believe the letter, or does he not? And we decided that he doesn't believe the letter. Therefore he doesn't believe Lorenzo is involved in the murder. But you could play it either way. It is written so that it's ambiguous. With this, picking up from what Lynn said, it's hard to imagine an interpretation of this where Hieronimo doesn't believe that Lorenzo murdered his son. It's open to interpretation whether Lorenzo picks up on it or not, depending on, as Lynn says, whether you do that line murder of a son or so as an aside. But it is putting Hieronimo very much into the camp of, I now definitely believe Bell'imperia's letter, whereas in the original version there is more room for ambiguity, and certainly the path we decided to take it down was that he actually was dismissing the letter, and that he was actually still bearing some goodwill towards Lorenzo in that scene, which I think it would be hard to do with this particular version. It does take it down one particular route.
I mean, there's that question. Listen more, nothing to bewray. When he says at the end of the speech, you get the impression of whatever his plan is, he's not going to tip his hand. But You know, this interpretation does suggest that he's tipping his hand all over the place, but because he's gone a bit more manic, then he gets away with it, which is the logic that a lot of texts have. Lynn, then Rachael.
Yes, and there's a scene later in the play between Hieronimo and Valimperia where she basically says, I wrote you a letter in my own blood. Why have you not done anything yet? And he says, forgive me, I wasn't sure if it was real. I didn't know what to believe. So that scene doesn't make very much sense if he's already kind of needling Lorenzo about, I know the truth. Or at least kind of feeling out Lorenzo by saying something about his murdered son and seeing how Lorenzo reacts. So I think it kind of creates a little bit of a continuity problem.
Yeah, just randomly saying murder of a son or so perhaps pushes that too far. Rachael, then Alan.
Yeah, I don't know. Oh my goodness, I don't know. I wonder if with the prequel to this, Hieronimo's thing, whenever Horatio brings up how Lorenzo is, plotting things and doing all these like terrible things, Hieronimo kind of says, there's not enough evidence, or, he pushes that away and says it's not the way that it looks. Instead of confronting Lorenzo, and if you put it together with that prequel, and if in a production of the Spanish tragedy you decided to include this scene and also be playing the prequel to it at the same time, this could be a major character change where he's being directly confrontational, and change the course of his character arc or something, or some other choice or some other thing, to some other note in his character.
Alan.
Yeah, I must admit that the thought I have on this is that one line in there, the murder of a son or so, addressed to Lorenzo, I think the character note I've picked up on for Lorenzo throughout the play is that basically he's a posh boy who's completely immune to any consideration of what others think, feel, or suffer. He's basically, I've got what I've got and sod the lot of you. So I think anything other than a direct accusation to him will just flow off his neck like a water off a duck's back.
There was something interesting that came out of, I think, discussions with Eric. I could be wrong about this. Could be in a different character and a different play. We do so many. That there was actually something slightly desperate about Lorenzo as the play goes on, as various plates are being spun in the air. So I wonder if there's possibly a bit more that could be teased out of that. Though whether this edition helps that or hinders that, I'm not sure. I'll go to Rachael, then Sarah.
Yeah, talking about Lorenzo's dialogue, because it's like Hieronimo's looking to get into it with him at first by saying the murder of a son or so, a thing of nothing, my lord. Why then farewell? It sounds like Hieronimo is at the door and Lorenzo basically closes it in his face because he knows where this could go, and he's not going to allow that conversation and that direct accusation, because then this could go further. I don't know, he just cuts him off, kind of.
Sarah.
Yeah, that's a really interesting interpretation. I would actually say it's the opposite. I would say it's Hieronimo going, oh no, it's fine, if I can't see Valimperia, it doesn't matter. And Lorenzo is like the one going, oh no, tell me, how now, what? Because I think maybe he is, or certainly you could play it that way, that he is actually suspicious. He wants to know what's going on in Hieronimo's mind. So you could play it the reverse of that Hieronimo is the one trying to get out of the door and Lorenzo is trying to hold him there. But what I was going to say was that picking up on what you said, Robert, about the conversation with Eric, which it must have been a session when I was there because I vaguely remember it. That actually makes that gives this edition more richness. Actually, if you take it that this is actually not about Hieronimo. This is more about Lorenzo and building up Lorenzo's character, and Lorenzo being a bit desperate, and this is the beginning of his journey from sort of smooth hound courtier into everything starts to unravel. Because if looking at it from Hieronimo's perspective, Hieronimo's character development, it's I don't feel it's as good as the first the first play, just the kid, because it does away with some of the subtlety. It does away with some of Hieronimo's character subtlety, but actually it maybe adds subtlety to Lorenzo's journey. So yeah, maybe that was just a decision that they, that was why it was added.
Lynn, muted at this second.
So yeah, and I think that what Alan said about Lorenzo's an aristocrat who's never been held accountable for his own bad behavior, and the discussions later about Lorenzo kind of really losing control of the situation and becoming a little like really coming apart at the seams. I think those two things are absolutely compatible. That he starts out as, I'm the heir apparent of Spain. My uncle's a duke. My uncle's a king. My father's a duke. I've never had a consequence, suffered a consequence in my entire life, to being completely out of control of the situation. He's really coming apart at the seams by the end because he's never had to he's never had to be accountable. He's never had to answer for his own behavior, and now like shit is coming down on his head and he has no idea what to do about it.
Yeah, because we do have that scene later on where his father basically turns up and says, "You've not been doing the family name any good, have you, Sonny Jim?" And it's got yeah. So there is that sense also that it's quite public. Some of the stuff he's up to is not as well hidden as he would like to think it is. Anyway, we should move on because that was quite a lot to talk about. 10 lines. Squeezed in. Let's do something slightly more substantive as we go to Act 3, Scene 11. So this is in what we call, shall we say, after the interval territory, where the plot is picking up pace, and certainly the grief of Hieronimo and Isabel is now starting to pick up. So we'll see what this edition does to it, because this is a point in the play itself that, yes, you could say that these are legitimate mad scenes, in that sort of early modern conception of what we mean by a very loose concept of madness. So for this, Briony, would you read Hieronimo, please? Alan, could you be Portingale number 1? And yes, Lalitte, could you be Portingale number 2, please? I played one of those, so it'll be interesting to see how that all flows together. So enter 2 Portingales, and Hieronimo meets them.
By your leave, sir?
'Tis neither as you think, nor as you think. Nor as you think. You're wide all. These slippers are not mine. They were my son Horatio's. My son! And what's a son? A thing begot within a pair of minutes thereabout, a lump bred up in darkness, and doth serve to balance these light creatures we call women, and at 9 months' end creeps forth to light. What is there yet in a son, to make a father dote, rave, or run mad? Being born it pouts, cries, and breeds teeth. What is there yet in a son? He must be fed, be taught to go and speak. Aye, or yet, why might not a man love a calf as well, or melt in passion o'er a frisking kid? As for a son, methinks a young bacon, or a fine little smooth horse colt, should move a man as much as doth a son, for one of these in very little time will grow some good use, whereas a son, the more he grows in stature and in years, the more unsquared, unbevelled he appears, reckons his parents among the rank of fools, strikes care upon their heads with his mad riots, makes them look old before they meet with age. This is a son, and what a loss were this, considered truly. Oh, but my Horatio grew out of reach of these insatiate humours. He loved his loving parents. He was my comfort and his mother's joy, our very arm that did hold up our house. Our hopes were stored up in him. None but a damned murderer could hate him. He had not seen the back of 19 year, when his strong arm unhorsed the proud Prince Balthazar, and his great mind, too full of honour, took him to his mercy. That valiant but ignoble Portingale, well, heaven is heaven still, and there is nemesis and furies and things called whips, and they sometimes do meet with murderers. They do not always scape, that is some comfort. Aye, and then time steals on, and steals till violence leaps forth, like thunder wrapped in a ball of fire, and so doth bring confusion to them all. Good leave have you, nay, I pray you go, for I'll leave you if you can leave me so.
Pray you, which is the next way to my lord the Duke's?
The next way from me.
To his house, we mean. Sorry.
Oh,
Sorry, that's-
hard by, 'tis yon house that you see.
You could not tell us if his son were there?
Who? My Lord Lorenzo?
I said,
And he goeth in at one door and cometh out at another.
Oh, forbear! For other talk for us far fitter were, but if you be importunate to know the way to him, and where to find him out, then list to me, and I'll resolve your doubt. There is a path upon your left-hand side, that leadeth from a guilty conscience unto a forest of distrust and fear, a darksome place and dangerous to pass. There shall you meet with melancholy thoughts, whose baleful humours, if you but uphold, it will conduct you to despair and death, whose rocky cliffs, when you have once beheld, within a huge dale of lasting night, but kindled with the world's iniquities, doth cast up filthy and detested fumes. Not far from thence, where murderers have built a habitation for their cursed souls, there, in a brazen cauldron fixed by Jove, in his fell wrath upon a sulphur flame, yourselves shall find Lorenzo bathing him in boiling lead and blood of innocence. Ha ha ha! Why, ha ha ha! Farewell, good! Ha ha ha!
Exit Hieronimo.
Doubtless this man is passing lunatic, or imperfection of his age doth make him dote. Come, let's away to seek my lord the Duke.
And exeunt Portingales. So, straight away, Rachael, you have a response.
I don't know, this one just feels like it's hitting all the wrong notes for what the Spanish tragedy was doing. Like he's talking to these Portingale guys who are probably going to serve on Balthazar, and in the kids stuff, he's not really talking to I mean, he does meet with them by chance. He meets with Lorenzo, he meets with the Duke, he meets with Balthazar by chance sometimes, and they exchange words, but you get the sense that it's in a public setting in view of other people, and that he's not seeking these people out. Whatever revenge he's planning it on his own terms, and he's not going to be in front of them, and risk the chance of giving it away, whatever his plan is to kill them. I think he's keeps his cards very close to him. you know, because he knows how you can get kicked out of court, which is why I think, like, in Kid's version, it's Bellamperia who goes to him and starts to talk to him, and then he gives her the plan.
Yeah, Briony.
Yeah, I don't know. It just felt a bit like they were just heaping on the madness with a big old spade there a bit. I don't know. I'm not as clear on where the additions are coming in, but yeah.
Well, I'll go to Sarah on that in a second, because Sarah will know exactly where the addition came in. Yeah, because it's really. I mean, so in the original scene, basically Portingale's come in and says, "Hello, sir. Could you show us the way to Amarillo or whatever?" And he says, "Oh, it's down here through the magical kingdom, down through the pits of despair." And then they go, "What?" And he runs away. Whereas here they go, "Oh, excuse me, sir," and he just talks bollocks at them. And then they ask him directions. I would not ask this man directions. I have no motivation as Portingale number 1 or 2 to follow through. I'd find someone else.
Exactly. It's just fudges it, because you get two things happening in the scene instead of one. And yes, you can kind of have lots of layers in a scene, but this just kind of does one thing and then another thing, and they're not really related.
No. I'll go to Sarah then, Lynn.
Right, well, I'm going to be slightly controversial here. I actually really like this edition, but I'm confused by it, because the way it seems, the thing that would make sense for me would be to start this scene with a soliloquy from Hieronimo. "'Tis neither as you think, nor as you think, nor as you think, I'm okay. I know that's addressed to a Portingale, but these slippers are not mine. They were Horatio's," because I actually really like that speech, and I think it does add something to Hieronimo's grief and mental illness journey. I think this whole kind of debate about what is a son, you know, why can't I love a small cute animal as much, you know, sons grow up, they give you loads of lip, they age you prematurely, why is it that I feel so, you know, he's basically questioning his own grief there. He's asking some pretty big universal questions, and I think as a speech on its own, it does kind of add to his psychological journey, and it could be a really, really useful addition. However, it makes no sense that he says it to the Portingales for the reason that Rachael mentioned, because yes, okay, he talks about Lorenzo being found in a pot of boiling lead or whatever, so it's clear that he maybe doesn't like Lorenzo, but he is, by that stage, you know, he's clearly having, or they think he's having a joke with them. So he doesn't give away, as Rachael said, he plays his cards close to his chest. He doesn't give away anything to strangers, especially to Portingales who are going to Lorenzo's house to see Balthazar. So it seems to me, on the one hand, I really like it as a speech, but it seems to me that the Portingales should enter after it, because if they are there for all of that, it's weird that he would do that, because even, you know, it's like, oh yes, he's mad, but you know, people who are mad have their reasons for doing things, and he has his reasons for doing things. Even the further he descends, he still has like a very good grip on like his plot all the way through, right to the end. You know, he executes it with, you know, deadly accuracy. So like I find that weird that he would, you know, open himself up to suspicion from them, and also because of what you said, Rob, because it's like, seriously, if you just heard someone do all of that, you go, oh, all right then, thank you, bye. You won't then ask them for directions.
It's the person who sits next to you on the bus. When there is literally no other seats with anyone on, they sit next to you.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's But I wonder whether it's a structural thing that whoever is the actor and they want someone else on stage to do this too.
Well, that's
Because that's the logic of the earlier mad speech as well. That this isn't I just come on and do a monologue. That this is something that can be enacted with other people as.
But there are other
victims.
monologues. He has these great big
Oh,
soliloquies.
I think we can establish this is quite self-indulgent. However, in terms of writing style, it does feel one with the following speech that is from the original. It does actually feel connected in that way. I'll go to Lynn, then Aliki, then Alan, then Rachael.
Yeah, I was basically going to make Sarah's observation about in itself, it's such a great speech because you have this ironic lead-in. Children are just a big pain in the ass, and they just make you old before your time. Who wants kids anyway? And then in the middle of a line, which I think is really kind of brilliant, right? What a loss were this considered truly. Oh, but my Horatio was different. He was a good kid. So could be such a bravura moment for an actor in itself, but it's kind of a shame that the scenes really show.
Aliki.
I have no need to say anything. Lynn said it all.
Excellent. Alan.
I'm just wondering whether we've got a misplaced thing in the script we're looking at, because you've got that long speech, which is pretty well a soliloquy from Hieronimo.
Yeah, it's right. I appreciate that it goes to Hieronimo again. That just basically demonstrates where the break is.
It would make more sense in some ways if the Portingale one line was coming in that gap in between the two Hieronimo speeches. In other words, he's off on one, enter two Portingales.
Yeah, I think in production we could definitely delay that and do that. That is, however, how it's laid out. It's laid out in the correct order. We just had an additional speech prefix because I forgot to take it out. Lalitte.
Yes, no, I was just going to ask Sarah, how would you feel acting it that if you did that as a soliloquy and then you go into this kind of acting with the two Portingales, because you have Hieronimo switching from real grief and getting unhinged to sort of pretending to be mad but actually being quite mad as well. So
I would love it.
It could be quite a nice switch.
Yeah, me personally, I would love it, and to me, I would rather play it that way than have someone on stage to play to. I mean, you just break the fourth wall and play it to the audience, which is what you do with a soliloquy. And I personally think it would work really well. So even if it wasn't meant to be that way originally, if I was going to direct it, that's certainly something I would be tempted to swap those lines of dialogue around and have them come in afterwards, because I do really like it and I think it would be great for an actor to play. But just
especially
not to
directly
else.
to an audience.
Yeah,
you can be talking to the blokes in the audience about being a father, and then sneering at the women about you need to have these kids to kind of give yourselves a bit of substance. Very much,
Yeah.
Rachel,
Verity, it's really sexist.
Rachael, I didn't go to you.
I'll show you the speech later, sweetheart.
I was just going to say about that. That was the idea that I was having, that when other people are viewing this, as opposed to like when Hieronimo is having this speech alone, it changes it changes the intention, because it changes the target of this speech. It's no longer to himself but for other people. And I think there's some play there that how there's that concept of a natural fool and an unnatural fool, that one is supposed to be a natural madness or grief, and then in this scene I feel like it's portraying a much more artificial madness, that this is something he's putting on to create rumors about himself that'll give him free rein to do whatever and whatever additions follow here.
Yes, I mean that's a good point. Is that how much of this is performative and how much is not? Because that there is a certain element of the logic there. Is that you can get away with things because he is pretending to be mad, which may or may not connect with if Kyd wrote the Hamlet, which may therefore be a theme from within his work, which of course may or may not connect with what we're talking about here. All sorts of things. Anyway, we are now going to jump to I see jump, sort of sachet, to Act 3, Scene 12 and a half. This is basically an entirely new scene. It doesn't have any connective tissue to anything else. So I'll ask Hieronimo to be Sarah this time. You get to have a play with this. Aliki, could you be the painter? Rachael, could you be Isabella? Lynn, can you be Jaques? And who have I got left? Who have I not got around to recently? Lalitte, could you be Pedro? I think I've done everyone. Hieronimo, Jaques, Pedro, Isabella, painter. Yes. Yeah, it's all new to you. Let's see what this edition does. Enter Jaques and Pedro.
Sorry about that. I wonder, Pedro, why our master thus at midnight sends us with torches light, when man and bird and beast are all at rest, save those that watch for rape and bloody murder.
Oh, Jaques, know that our master's mind is much distraught since his Horatio died, and now his aged years should sleep in rest, his heart in quiet, like a desperate man grows lunatic and childish for his son. Sometimes as he doth at his table sit, he speaks as if Horatio stood by him, then starting in a rage, falls on the earth, cries out, Horatio, where's my Horatio? So that with extreme grief and cutting sorrow there is not left in him 1 inch of man. See where he comes.
Enter Hieronimo.
I pry through every crevice of each wall, look on each tree, and search through every brake, beat at the bushes, stamp our grandam earth, dive in the water, and stare up to heaven. Yet I cannot behold my son Horatio. How now? Who's there? Spirits? Spirits?
We are your servants that attend you, sir.
What make you with your torches in the dark?
You bid us light them and attend you here?
No, you are deceived. Not I. You are deceived. Was I so mad to bid you light your torches now? Light me your torches at the mid of noon, when as the sun god rides in all his glory. Light me your torches then.
But then we burn daylight.
Let it be burnt. Night is a murderous slut that would not have her treasons to be seen. And yonder pale-faced Hecate there, the moon, doth give consent to that is done in darkness. And all those stars that gaze upon her face are aglets on her sleeve, pins on her train. And those that should be powerful and divine do sleep in darkness when they most should shine.
Provoke them not, fair sir, with tempting words. The heavens are gracious, and your miseries and sorrow makes you speak you know not what.
Villain, thou liest, and thou dost naught but tell me I am mad. Thou liest, I am not mad. I know thee to be Pedro, and he Jaques. I'll prove it to thee. And were I mad, how could I? Where was she that same night when my Horatio was murdered? She should have shone. Search thou the book. Had the moon shone in my boy's face, there was a kind of grace that I know. Nay, I do know. Had the murderer seen him, his weapon would have fallen and cut the earth. Had he been framed of naught but blood and death. Alack, when mischief doth it knows not what shall we say to mischief?
Enter Isabella.
Dear Hieronimo, come indoors. Oh, speak not means so to increase thy sorrow.
Indeed, Isabella, we do nothing here. I do not cry. Ask Pedro, and ask Jaques. Not I, indeed. We are very merry. Very merry.
How? Be merry here? Be merry here? Is not this the place, and this the very tree, where my Horatio died, where he was murdered?
Was. Do not say what. Oh, let her weep it out. This was the tree. I set it of a kernel, and when our hot Spain could not let it grow, but that the infant and the human sap began to wither, duly twice a morning would I be sprinkling it with fountain water. At last it grew, and grew, and bore and tore, till at the length it grew a gallows, and did bear our son. It bore thy fruit and mine. Oh, wicked, wicked plant!
One knocks within at the door.
See, who knocked there?
It is a painter, sir.
Bid him come in and paint some comfort, for surely there's none lives but painted comfort. Let him come in. One knows not what may chance. God's will that I should set this tree. But even so, masters' ungrateful servants rear from naught, and then they hate them that did bring them up.
Enter the painter.
God bless you, sir.
Wherefore? Why, thou scornful villain, how, where, or by what means should I be blessed?
What wouldst thou have, good fellow?
Justice, madam.
Ho, ambitious beggar! Wouldst thou have that lives not in the world? Why, all the undelved minds cannot buy an ounce of justice. It is a jewel so inestimable, I tell thee, God hath engrossed all justice in his hands, and there is none but what comes from him.
Oh, then I see that God must right me for my murdered son.
How? Was thy son murdered?
Ay, sir, no man did hold a son so dear.
What? Not as thine, that's a lie, as massy as the earth. I had a son, whose least unvalued hair did weigh 1,000 of thy sons, and he was murdered.
Alas, sir, I had no more but he.
Nor I. But this same one of mine was worth a legion. But all is one. Pedro, Jaques, go indoors. Isabella, go. And this good fellow here and I will range this hideous orchard up and down, like two lions reaved of their young. Go indoors, I say.
And they exit. The painter and Hieronimo sit down.
Come, let's talk wisely now. Was thy son murdered?
Ay, sir.
So was mine. How dost take it? Art thou not sometimes mad? Is there no tricks that comes before thine eyes?
Oh, Lord, yes, sir.
Oh, art a painter? Canst paint me a tear, or a wound, a groan, or a sigh? Canst paint me such a tree as this?
Sir, I am sure you have heard of my painting. My name's Bizzardo.
Bizzardo! Afore God, an excellent fellow. Look you, sir, do you see? I'd have you paint me for my gallery, in your oil colours matted, and draw me 5 years younger than I am. Do you see, sir? Let 5 years go. Let them go like the Marshal of Spain. My wife Isabella standing by me, with a speaking look to my son Horatio, which should intend to this or some like purpose. God bless thee, my sweet son. And my hand leaning upon his head, thus, sir. Do you see? May it be done?
Very well, sir.
Nay, I pray, mark me, sir. Then, sir, would I have you paint me this tree, this very tree. Canst paint a doleful cry?
Seemingly, sir.
Nay, it should cry, but all is one. Well, sir, oh, paint me a youth. run through and through with villain swords hanging upon this tree. Canst thou draw a murderer?
I'll warrant you, sir, I have the pattern of the most notorious villains that ever lived in all Spain.
Oh, let them be worse, worse! Stretch thine art, and let their beards be of Judas his own colour, and let their eyebrows jutty over. In any case, observe that. Then, sir, after some violent noise, bring me forth in my shirt and my gown under mine arm, with my torch in my hand and my sword reared up thus, and with these words, what noise is this? Who calls Hieronimo? May it be done?
Yea, sir.
Well, sir, then bring me forth, bring me through alley and alley, still with a distracted countenance going along, and let my hair heave up my nightcap. Let the clouds scowl, make the moon dark, the stars extinct, the wind blowing, the bells tolling, the owls shrieking, the toads croaking, the minutes jarring, and the clock striking 12. And then at last, sir, starting, behold a man hanging, and tottering. As you know, the wind will wave a man, and I, with a trice to cut him down, and looking upon him by the advantage of my torch, find it to be my son Horatio. There you may show a passion. There you may show a passion. Draw me like old Priam of Troy, crying, the house is afire, the house is afire, as the torch over my head. Make me curse, make me rave, make me cry, make me mad, make me well again. Make me curse hell, invocate heaven, and in the end leave me in a trance. And so forth.
And this is the end.
Oh no! There is no end. The end is death and madness. As I am never better than when I am mad, then methinks I am a brave fellow, then I do wonders. But reason abuseth me. There's the torment, there's the hell. At the last, sir, bring me to one of the murderers. Were he as strong as Hector, thus would I tear and drag him up and down.
And he beats the painter in, then comes out again with a book in his hand, saying, Vindicta mihi! And that's how the scene that has been added, in theory, then moves into a lengthy speech by Hieronimo, which I'm sure Sarah will remember more than necessarily anyone else in the room does. Thoughts? Or immediately crowding in, Aliki and then Rachael.
I don't see the point of this scene other than to give him yet another mad speech. And I feel really sorry for the poor painter who also has a dead son he's searching justice for, and he just gets yelled at and not even, well, it looks like he's trying to get some work or so. I don't know what he's even there for. I'm sorry. I find it very unnecessary.
Yeah, it's reminded me of the Big Train sketch where someone goes in for being assaulted or something, and they're trying to go to a sketch artist, and the sketch artist is saying, "Well, what are the eyes like?" "Well, they're very sad." And they use descriptions that you cannot use to sketch anything with. So many hands. I think Rachael was next. Then I'll go to Briony, Lynn, things.
Yeah. I was kind of gonna say that the other scene from Kids thing where he's at his office and people are coming in for stuff makes more sense, because it has there's like something about happenstance or happen chance about it, you know what I mean, like it just seems to happen. And then I also wanted to ask a question about this. Did people like paint death portraits then? Because I know for photography there was a thing where people would take, if somebody's child or something had just died or a relative had just died, they would put them up and they would take a family portrait with them, like they were alive still. So was that a thing like back all the way then, where people would paint dead people?
I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if it was, but I have absolutely no idea. Hold on to that thought for the moment. I'll see if anyone else does know. But we'll go to Briony to continue this train.
Yeah, I do think all these additional scenes are just shoveling on more madness onto Hieronimo. I'm not really saying much about whether I think it's adding to the character at this point, but like this last one's just a bit surreal. Like, Hieronimo commissions a painting madly. What will he do in the next episode? Try on shoes insanely. You know, it's like, what?
Oh no, he's already done that. Those slippers are not mine. That was in the Yeah, absolutely. It's like, yeah, well, how do we do that? Lynn, then Lalitte, I think, and then Sarah. Oh, and then Alan.
Okay, I am super confused because when I saw this Spanish tragedy performed about 10 years ago, they had a painter scene. But what I remember, I don't know how accurately, about what happened in that scene is that the painter came as a petitioner because his son had been murdered, kind of like that scene in the original version where all these people are coming to the Lord Marshal for justice. But the painter was one of them, or he was the only one. And the painter wants justice because his son's been murdered. And what I remember is that Hieronimo keeps saying, "Are you my son? You look just like my son." And actually mistakes the painter for his son. And in that production, the actor who had played Horatio doubled as the painter. So it was very eerie and meta-theatrical and very effective, although it didn't advance the plot at all. So I like, am I having a created memory about that scene? I'm so confused.
I think what they've done is the thing I was thinking of as we were going, is they've elided Basulto, who is in the next scene or the scene after that.
Yeah.
And because they do the same job. They both come on and say, my son is dead. This one with no reason at all. Whereas the other one is part of a logic about justice. So there is a workaround, because there are some really good bits in this, I have to say. That's the problem, is this self-indulgence thing. Is sometimes with a production you have to go, right, okay, sometimes you have to say this bit's really good, but there's too much of this really good stuff. And, you know, that's the problem with all of these editions, of going, well, they're quite good, some of them, but they don't help, actually, in terms of flow of action. Lalitte, and then Sarah, then Alan.
I was going to say that this makes the later scene completely redundant. You know, if you have kind of two fathers coming in saying, yeah, my son got killed. So I think that's what that production must have done. But it also kind of reminded me of, you know, the whole kind of play within the play idea, or the kind of function of art and life that's, you know, sort of where people kind of reflect on something happening, and then on how it might be presented. And that I don't know if that's needed, because it kind of happens anyway with the mask. So I don't know if one needs this kind of meta bit there or not, even though it does have some very nice lines.
Yeah, I mean, there's a interesting other thing to do with shrubbery, but I'll come to that in a moment. Sarah.
Yeah, I was wondering, is this an actual addition, or is it perhaps an alternative? Because as I was reading that, I mean, that was really easy for me to read, because it was basically the scene with Basulto redone in a different way. And, you know, it's Bazzardo the artist rather than Basulto the old man. And I think, yeah, Lynn, you must have seen a version where those two scenes, like the greatest hits from both, were taken and put together. But I mean, surely they wouldn't put this scene in the Bazzardo scene and the Basulto scene in the same play, because they serve the same function. And for my money, although there are some beautiful bits in this, for my money, the Basulto scene is the better choice of the two, because like more gets done in terms of the journey, the growth of the psychology, the dramatic arc of Hieronimo's journey, because he has that bit where he does actually mistake Basalto for his own son, and that kind of takes you into a new phase of his madness, whereas this doesn't really seem to go anywhere, even though there are some really lovely bits in it. So is it actually an addition, or is it maybe just like an alternative version? So like, you go, come and see it one night, get the old man, come and see it the next night, get the painter.
Well, it's a really good point, because the scene we're going to do next is an alternative version. Even though it's printed back to back, it's clearly they've added in the new scene, but they haven't removed the bit of the scene that was there before. It doesn't read that way in the version we're going to do, because I removed the substitution. So actually, there's a certain logic there. For all that it says the stage direction, he comes back in with a book in his hand. The two do sort of do the same job, and actually that's entirely plausible. I don't know if editions have picked up on that as a thought, but I think you've got a point that it may not be an addition, strictly speaking. It may be an alternative scene, that simply they didn't want to have these random petitioners, and they've already added in a family grouping with Isabella and stuff. There's an additional interesting sort of echo, and it's sort of that we've got this whole thing about attacking shrubbery, because Isabella has a thing against the arbour, and there's constantly talking about the tree, the stuff that's hanging there. So I'm wondering if, again, it feels like all of these are actually, they're not adding things, they're doing different versions of things a lot of the time. That it's a series of mirrors, that we're just getting more of the same. But I mean, ultimately in our production we can do whatever we like. So if you like bits of this, you might be able to just include a few bits of the painter Hieronimo discussion into the Basaltos without going wholesale into painter dynamics. I'll go to Alan because he's been waiting a long time, then I'll go back to Sarah and Rachael, and then we'll move on. We will.
Yeah, I must admit, I don't think that this scene adds much apart from a few nice bits of phrasing. I think Sarah's probably right that this is actually an alternative to the petitioners and scene that follows in the version we've just done. And it's not as if this play is running short in terms of time. And it seems bizarre that someone should have added what's quite a wordy additional sequence to what's already a fairly long bum-numbing evening or performance.
Yeah. Rachael. Oh no, sorry, I was going to go to Sarah then Rachael.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, because I forgot to say before in reply to Rachel's question, you do get portraits from this era, like they're not so much death portraits, but they're like biography portraits, where like in the foreground, like on the left hand side, there's the person lying in bed, and then like to the right of that there's like scenes from his life or her life kind of all around the painting, and they're not in individual paints, they're just sort of like they all kind of lead on from each other and sort of lead you around a path to the deathbed. So maybe that's kind of what whoever did the edition or the alternative version had in mind. But what is really interesting is that, like, I mean, what's quite funny about it is that, you know, if you put everything in that Hieronimo wants in it, it would just be you know, it would just be nuts, because they'd normally have like maybe 4 or 5 scenes. It would be a wide canvas with the deathbed at one end, and there'd be like a few scenes going around a path, but this would just be like crazy with just everything.
Rachael, very briefly, and then we will move on.
Yeah, they'd have it like in a golden ratio or something, sort of looking like a journey.
Yes,
a travel.
Yeah.
I was going to say about the old man. If this is an alternate scene, I think the one that we were reading with Kid, there's something more in that, because it's an old man who's lost his son, and there's no one to take care of him. And I think he sees both his son, you could play it, a production could or the actor could choose for Hieronimo to see, oh, my son will never get that old. He'll never reach that age. He'll never become a father. He could throw all those things onto it. And Hieronimo could alternatively also see, that's me, and I won't have my son to take care of me. Where a painter, that profession is unrelated to Hieronimo, where I feel the old man is like a state that he'll reach or that he's at. And there's more empathy that you could play there. And I think if there's things in the scene that are good, you could pull them out and, perhaps throw them into the other scene that we read on Friday. Or the Friday before, I can't even remember.
They all blur into one. Okay, we've got one more edition to go, and it's in the middle of the final scene. We're still in the process of playing around with creating the translated versions of the play within play, so we're going to skip that to the culmination of the scene rather than run the whole thing, which I was sort of toying with doing, but we will not. So we're going to go from where Hieronimo runs to hang himself. Hieronimo has made a massive speech. Everyone's sort of started stabbing each other in horrible stabby kinds of ways. And we're going to pick up from O Hearken Viceroy with the king. So those who are still left alive, I had more parts to hand out if we were doing the whole scene, but quite a few people have popped their clogs. So I'll ask Lynn if you could reprise your king, Alan if you could reprise your Viceroy. Yep. Briony, could you read Castile? And Rachael, if you could be Hieronimo. I think everybody else is dead. Yeah, I think that's as good as it gets. So we have a bit of run-in before we hit the editions and then see what we get. So for everyone, basically, Hieronimo has just explained at great length that his son has been murdered. He shows his dead son. Now, I don't know how many weeks have passed. So when he pulls his curtain across, I mean, Gordon Bennett, it's grim, this bit. But he has also just stabbed Balthazar, Lorenzo, and Bellimperia's just stabbed herself. So stage is littered with corpses. Hieronimo's runs off to hang himself.
Oh, hearken, Viceroy! Hold, Hieronimo! Brother, my nephew, and thy son are slain.
We are betrayed! My Balthazar is slain! Break open the doors! Run! Save Hieronimo!
They break in and hold Hieronimo.
Hieronimo! Do but inform the king of these events. Upon mine honour, thou shalt have no harm.
Viceroy, I will not trust thee with my life, which I this day have offered to my son. Accursed wretch, why stayest thou him that was resolved to die?
Speak, traitor. Damn the bloody murderer, speak. And now I have thee, I will make thee speak. Why hast thou done this undeserving deed?
Why hast thou murdered my Balthazar?
Why hast thou butchered both my children thus?
But are you sure they are dead?
Aye, slave, too sure.
What? And yours too?
Aye, all are dead. Not one of them survive.
Nay, then I care not. Come, and we shall be friends. Let us lay our heads together. See, here's a goodly noose will hold them all.
Damn devil, how secure he is.
Secure? Why? Dost thou wonder at it? I tell thee, Viceroy, this day I have seen revenge, and in that sight am grown a prouder monarch than ever sat under the crown of Spain. Had I as many lives as there be stars, as many heavens to go to as those lives, I'd give them all, aye, and my soul to boot. But I would see thee ride in this red pool.
Speak. Who were thy confederates in this?
That was thy daughter Bellimperia, for by her hand my Balthazar was slain. I saw her stab him.
Oh, good words. As dear to me was my Horatio as yours, or yours, or yours, my lord, to you. My guiltless son was by Lorenzo slain, and by Lorenzo and that Balthazar, upon whose souls may heavens be yet avenged, with greater far than these afflictions. Methinks, since I grew inward with revenge, I cannot look with scorn enough on death.
What? Dost thou mock us, slave? Bring tortures forth.
Do, and meantime I'll torture you. You had a son, as I take it, and your son have been married to your daughter. Wast not so? You had a son too. He was my liege's nephew. He was proud and politic. Had he lived, he might have come to wear the crown of Spain. I think 'twas so. 'Twas I that killed him. Look you, this same hand was it that stabbed his heart. Do you see this hand? For one Horatio, if you ever knew him, a youth, one that they hanged up in his father's garden, one that did force your valiant son to yield, but your valiant son did take him prisoner.
Be deaf my senses, I can hear no more.
Fall heaven and cover us with thy sad ruins.
Roll all the world within thy pitchy cloud.
Now do I applaud what I have acted. Nunc ineres coede manus. Now to express the rupture of my part, first take my tongue and afterwards my heart.
And he bites out his tongue.
O monstrous resolution of a wretch! See, Viceroy, he hath bitten forth his tongue rather than to reveal what we required.
Yet can he write.
And if in this he satisfy us not, we will devise the extremest kind of death that ever was invented for a wretch.
And yes, it makes sign of knife and death, death, death. We'll just pause there because we've come out the other side. And that's where there is a slight discontinuity problem that sort of occurs. Because it's like, he hasn't told us the information. Yes, he has at great length. So, yeah. There is an interesting problem with this edition. As it's, however the way you pass it, it doesn't quite flow back into the rest of the text. Beyond that, he just how that works is slightly confused. But yeah, in this version, Hieronimo gives us a blow-by-blow statement as to whys and wherefores. So maybe at the time there were audience members feeling, hang on, why did he do it again? I nipped out for beer when he was explaining earlier. I don't know why all this murder happened at the end. Sarah, you as Hieronimo last time. How do you feel about your alternative ending?
Well, Okay, so there is some good speechifying in there, but it's not just the whole thing with the pen. Yeah, there's that continuity problem, but also, why would he bite his tongue out?
Yeah.
Like, why would he go to the trouble of biting out his own tongue, which is not easy, even when you're faking it?
A how-to video on how to achieve this effect is fourth. No, it won't.
But like, seriously, why would they leave that in? Well, okay, of course I know why they'd leave it in. It's because everyone's waiting for the bit where he bites his tongue out. But then why would you put in all of that if he's then going to bite his tongue out? Like, it makes no sense. And I can only think that, yes, either it's what you were saying, Rob, and like there were people in the audience who were confused, or like the actor was like, oh no, I need a bit more here. I need a bit more speechifying. Like, I haven't had enough already, because seriously, he's already had this huge speech with the body that's in the original version where he, boy Horatio is there, in whatever state of decomposition. And it's like, why? You can't have this and have the tongue biting. You can't do both. But clearly they did, so that's a problem.
Yeah, you've gone on for 80 whole lines earlier in you had the floor, and need a bit more. Lynn, then Briony.
Yeah, I mean, I did sort of feel like in the version that we did over the past few weeks that there was a kind of lack of closure, because Hieronimo never actually says Balthazar and Lorenzo murdered my son for daring to have an assignation with Bella Imperia. It felt like, your revenge is really only complete when you tell everybody about it, and he never really does. So I can really understand the impulse to make that more explicit, but you can't have it both ways. You can't really justify him biting his own tongue out and have the blow by blow that he offers prior to it. It kind of doesn't make sense.
He does kind of, though. I mean, it's maybe not as laid out on a plate, and maybe it was the way I was reading it as well last week. But he does actually say that, these two butchered up my boy. And he does say, and to this end, besure I became that might revenge me on Lorenzo's life. And he does kind of, because to be honest, when I was prepping for the role, I thought even what he was saying before was kind of a bit, well, like, why they're clearly a bit obtuse, this king and this this duke, because he does kind of say it. And yet they're still like, oh, why would he do this? But so it is kind of there. And I mean, I can understand the audience maybe missing it perhaps, but I don't know that it's enough to warrant putting in another bloody great speech that goes on the pages.
Briony, then Alan, then Rachael.
It just feels to me like the mad mega mix of Hieronimo. I mean, I don't know why you would need to find logic in that. We just needed him to be even madder than he was before. I don't know. I think that's, I don't know, if they were trying to develop the story more or anything like that, I don't know whether they've succeeded, but they've definitely made him much madder.
Hieronimo 2, this time he's really mad. Madderer than ever. I mean, because it's why hast thou murdered? Why hast thou butchered? But are you sure they're dead? Wacka wacka. I mean...
Right? Like...
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a weird tone about the speech as well, because there are bits where he almost kind of is quite pally with them. He says, there's the news for both our heads, and like, you had a son... and you had a son, and so he kind of makes this connection with all of them, almost as though he's putting them all at peace. So that didn't, emotionally that doesn't make sense. So that was quite interesting in itself.
Yeah, but again, we've got this repetition of this thing of Hieronimo not making speeches. He's doing stuff to people, or with people with his speeches. There's always somebody else. These editions always have someone else in the room. It's not like someone's just said, "I want a longer speech." It seems. I know this is just completely off, but it does feel like that there's a thing of he likes to work a room, quality to it. Who did I say next? Was it Rachael or was it Alan? I'll go to Alan then, Rachael.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that if you don't ask him for a written statement, you've got no logic to actually him getting a knife and therefore stabbing Castile and himself. So the logic of it just falls apart. And I mean, yes, there's some lovely words in there, but I'm not entirely sure that it's added much to the direction of travel.
Well, yeah, and I mean to be critical of the original play overall, that ending with the pen and the knife feels awkward. The tongue biting, yeah, fine, even though I like it to be structurally easier to do. I mean, it's very difficult to figure out how you get the tongue in there when he's in the middle of making a bloody speech. But that whole thing, so there's an element of this just feels like it's just stage logic. It all happens so quickly that you only ask these questions when you're in the car on the way home. And that, so long as you do it with enough impotence, it doesn't matter. Anyway, Rachael.
No, I was just gonna bring up the torture part. Because I thought in the version that we did right before the weekend, that the torture came in because he wasn't speaking, and they were gonna torture it out of him. So yeah, I feel in agreement with other people because these are like beautiful speeches / like semi cut up monologues, but they I don't know, they're trying to force more text into this, but they don't change the consequences of it.
Yeah, because there are bits. Because the two overlap a bit, because there are some bits that sort of survive from one. It's a very odd little selection, because there are bits from the earlier version, but they're in a slightly different place, and things are done in a slightly different order. So yeah. Other thoughts about this? Some people seem to be having some lagging problems. I'm currently fine for everyone, so you can speak freely if you can hear me.
Who said that?
Yeah. So we've done all the editions, and having done this play a few times now, plus looked at the editions, and obviously we've also got Hieronimo as well, of saying that what you've got with Spanish tragedy is this sort of embarrassment of riches. There's how you cut the play. You can cut this material into the production you want. Lynn's already sort of thrown that in by saying, "I saw a production. Hang on, did this happen here?" And I suspect there's been a number of productions in the past that have been perhaps too self-indulgent because they've got too much material in, because they've got, "Oh, I love this speech. Oh, I love this scene," rather than going, actually, no, maybe we should tell the story better. So are there any of these scenes or bits that people were desperate to fit into a production? Or do you actually want to ditch them all? And that's basically going to be the final thought as we go around the room. I'm going to stick this to being more of talk about if this was theatre, where we have a strict time limit, rather than, say, online, where we could do everything and it wouldn't be wearing because you could watch it in episodes or in different orders. But I'll go around the room. Sarah, I'll start with you. You've been the most Hieronimo of us all. How thoughts about what material you'd like to keep? What would you like to get rid of?
The Portingale, the Portingale speech, the addition there. I would add in, but I would want to have it as a soliloquy. So I would want to move that very first line by the Portingale to after the end of that speech, play it as a soliloquy, and then have the Portingales come in after it, because I think it does add something to his psychological journey, but it makes no sense to have it with other people present. But it's a long speech, so I mean, I think probably what I would do, I think there's probably, I don't know, there's maybe room to cut a bit of make a bit of space at the beginning of the play. All that business with, the scutcheons. You could maybe trim that scene. The trouble with that is that it kind of sets up who he is before he goes mad, which is important. So you wouldn't want to cut too much, but you could maybe save a little bit there from the original text, cut a little bit there in order to add this in without making it too long. But honestly, the rest of it, I mean, there is some beautiful stuff in those end speeches, and there is some beautiful stuff in the painter section. You could maybe edit in odd lines from the additions into the original script if you really wanted to, but I'd be tempted to. I love the original so much. I'd be tempted to play it as is, maybe trim a little off the beginning in order to add in the Portingale edition from this, and that's all I would do. The rest of it, I'm like, I don't think it needs it. It's all there in the original.
Lalitte, do you have any final thoughts?
Yes, I'd actually agree with Sarah that the editions tend to dilute it, and the plays, it's kind of, you don't want to kind of slacken the tension on it. I think some of the longer speeches, you can kind of cull things within speeches. So when you suddenly get this huge kind of bank of text, sometimes, I can see that you might need a kind of running jump up to a particularly intense moment, and therefore you need the number of lines leading to that. But quite often I think you can kind of compress things as you go without actually changing the overall shape of the play or any of the character arcs. But I'd agree about the additions. That I don't really just that one speech.
So some fans for the additional Portingale speech. Any other additions that are winning favours so far? We'll see where we go. Aliki, you haven't been as involved with Spanish tragedies as the others, so you're coming into this a bit blind. Any final thoughts from you?
I'm also a big fan of "So a son, what's the big deal?" speech. I think that's a great speech and should be saved. But yeah, I don't think that any of the other scenes we've read today add much.
Nobody's going for the painter?
No, nobody's going for the painter. I mean, I did actually enjoy the mistaken identity bit in the discovery of the body scene. No, it's not really him. It's somebody else. Of course it's somebody else. My son can't be dead. I think that's both psychologically astute and quite lovely to do. But I don't know that it's worth doing.
Alan, any final thoughts?
I must admit that having gone through these ones, I was almost wondering whether we've actually got the chronology reversed. That these were scenes that were there and then got trimmed, because I think most of them could be trimmed quite easily without massive loss to the storyline. And as has been said, a lot of the additional material just dilutes the intensity, and I think it makes it a less satisfactory piece.
Briony, you haven't been a fan of the speeches so far, but maybe you've been hiding.
It's not that I've not been a fan of them. There's some nice stuff there. There's some really nice moments there, but the original story doesn't need any of this. There's nothing lacking in it, to my mind, And all this does, I mean, because I don't know, personally, it feels like the madness is a bit overdone at times with all of these additions. And so I think I'd struggle to keep it as serious. You know, if you've got a good enough actor who can portray the madness, there's enough in the original script. I don't think, apart from maybe if you really wanted to hand pick some nice little phrases out, I don't think it's needed.
Rachael, any final thoughts on the additions? Keep or dump?
I would like to see what you could do with that Act 3, Scene 2 one with Lorenzo and Hieronimo, because there is that tension there of I like how Sarah said that it could be Hieronimo backing off in that situation, or if you could have moments where Lorenzo is pushing forward and Hieronimo is backing off, and then other moments where Hieronimo is coming up, you know, and being more aggressive, and then Lorenzo is backing off. And I think you could have there is some nice tension that could go there, you know, of the servant opening the door and saying, "He's here, my lord," or, you know, and have it be very, you know, whispers behind a door, and then Lorenzo coming out and all these things like that, and have it be very disorganized and frantic on all their part. I like the original scene too. I don't know, but I don't know if I'd include it, but I think that's the only one that I would, you know, think about including. The other ones, there's something about the pacing that just gets thrown off, that diffuses the tension instead of amps it up. And this is the only one that I think that keeps tension really up there.
Lynn,
Yeah,
snog, marry, avoid. Sorry.
So yeah, I would just very closely echo Sarah and Lalitte, and I can't remember who else said that Aliki, that monologue about, oh, who would want a son anyway, and the irony of that, and that about face, he does such a good speech. I would want to make some effort to find some way to interleave that somewhere. And I also agree with Lalitte that I think the thing to do, rather than look for big chunks of text to take out, is to do kind of more surgical cuts in the long speeches that Hieronimo has elsewhere. It's a lot more work, but I think that would be the way to do it, is to make smaller excisions throughout those longer speeches, to try to make room to fit that in somewhere. I like it so much.
Any other thoughts anyone wants to throw in? We've got a couple of minutes to go. I mean, it's a big challenge. I've been thinking increasingly about, you know, the structure of the play and how that opening act works in terms of you know, getting the audience into the story without going on too long, because the story does take a while to kick in. And back in the room, Elizabeth, do you have any final thoughts for the text?
I really liked the additions. I liked them all. I think that some of them are a bit awkward, but I liked them all, and I particularly loved scene 12 and a half with the painter in it. And I was thinking to myself, how can you like pad out the text? Because I was just thinking that Hieronimo is Mad Again was popular for a while when the additions, hopefully when the additions were included. And so everybody is like, oh, he's mad again, you know, because they knew the text quite well. So I think that these additions are kind of serve an audience that know the original text. They kind of know it, and then they're like, oh, they've added this in, and oh, they've added that in. And it reminded me of the Snyder Cut, because there was a big thing about Justice League and about how it was completely re-edited for Zack Snyder's version, and I felt that that's what we were watching. Well, I was watching today. I was watching like the Snyder cut of the Spanish Tragedy, and I liked it. I think it had different tones in it, different flavors in it. I liked. I think the bit of the tongue getting cut out was a bit awkward. Some of the basic plot points were a bit shaky in the editions. So that would be something to work on. I think it was Lynn who said that a surgical approach to it would work. I really want to keep a lot of the lines from the editions. I think it has some really beautiful lines in it. So yeah, I like them. I think I'm the only one in the room that did.
Well, it might be a case that we've done the original version that we have quite a lot. Once we get bored, maybe we just throw in the additions and just spice it up. Maybe that's the way to think of it. Is actually wait 10 years when we're really bored of this play, and see whether actually I just want to go mad again. On stage. Sarah.
Just following on from what Elizabeth said as well, it just suddenly occurred to me, I wonder if these editions, like that painter's scene, is reminding me a little bit of you get all the Toy Story films, and then you sometimes get a Toy Story short at the beginning of a different Pixar movie. Yeah. I'm just wondering, that painter's scene, it's like everybody's sitting down to watch a bit of Webster or whatever, and it's just to get the audience warmed up. Oh, we're just gonna start with the painter scene from Hieronimo, and everyone's like, yes, just to get everyone going. And I mean, because you could almost play that. I mean, obviously you've got to know what the story is, but clearly everybody did know what the story was. So maybe it was just greatest hits. Just everyone's asking for the Spanish Tragedy. No, we want to do this. We want to do this new play. We want to present new material. Oh, we'll just shove this one at the beginning. It'll get everybody in. They'll come for that, and then they'll stay for the new work.
Yeah, I think Briony said earlier it felt like they're just working through, and Hieronimo's mad in the kitchen. Hieronimo's mad in the, which context can we just throw Hieronimo at? And yeah, I was definitely thinking ahead, in terms of, say, the audio version for the podcast. We have the perfect ability to release it several times with different cuts, with the original, with the additions, and in our own super deluxe edit. And it's not fundamentally harder to do that than just record one of them, because that's what you can do with audio. So there's also that option as well. We can do all the things because you can do it in the edit afterwards. So there's something I quite like about that. Well, we have run out of time. We have. We're mostly letting Spanish Tragedy now go into text prep question mode, where this might go into a more blog area where we sort of dance around what we might do with the text before we get to running it again in the future, with cuts and with some artistic intent. But till then, all that remains to thank all these wonderful readers for their wonderful reading. Thank you very much, everyone, and goodbye.
Bye.
Canst paint a doleful cry?